Welcome to Soul Stories, where every tale touches the heart and inspires the soul. Sophie adjusted her pale blue dress for what felt like the 100th time, smoothing the fabric over her lap as sunlight filtered through the cafe window. Outside, spring painted the city in warm gold. Couples strolled by hand in hand, laughter floating like tiny bubbles in the air. Inside, she sat quietly in her wheelchair, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. It was her first date in years. Ever since the accident 3 years ago, Sophie's life had been split into two chapters, before and after the chair. Once, she was the woman who danced at every party, who hiked mountains for fun, who believed love was something you ran toward. Now, she wasn't even sure if she could crawl back to it. When Daniel's messages first appeared online, kind, funny, surprisingly gentle, she thought maybe fate was giving her another chance. He said he admired her honesty, said her wheelchair didn't define her. He even joked about bringing extra chocolate croissants because first dates deserve something sweet. But now, sitting there with her untouched croissant and a cold cappuccino, Sophie couldn't help glancing at the door every few seconds. Each time it opened, hope flickered in her chest. Each time it closed, it dimmed a little more. Minutes dragged into an hour. Her reflection in the cafe window looked small and fragile. The sunlight had shifted, throwing long shadows across her table. Around her, the place buzzed with easy conversations, friends laughing, lovers whispering secrets. And yet, she sat alone in a silence that grew heavier with every tick of the clock. People began to notice. A couple at the next table exchanged sympathetic glances. A group of students near the counter whispered softly, thinking she couldn't hear. She could. Every word, every stare pressed against her chest like invisible weights. Still, she smiled politely at the waiter who refilled her cup and murmured, "He'll be here soon." But deep down, she already knew. When the second hour passed and the waiter came back again, Sophie finally exhaled. Her hands were cold, her heart colder. She whispered to herself, maybe he changed his mind. She looked at the empty chair across from her, the one that was supposed to hold hope, and for the first time in years, she let a tear fall in public. No phone call, no message. Just silence. And in that silence, Sophie realized that sometimes the cruelest pain isn't being rejected, it's being forgotten. Sophie blinked away a tear, trying to compose herself before anyone noticed. She turned slightly toward the window, hoping to hide her face, but a small, gentle voice broke through the silence. "Are you waiting for someone, miss?" Sophie looked down. A little girl stood beside her, clutching a pink balloon shaped like a heart. She had big brown eyes, full of curiosity and innocence, the kind that could disarm even the saddest soul. Sophie quickly wiped her cheeks and forced a smile. "I was, sweetheart, but I think he's not coming." The little girl tilted her head, thinking hard, then said with the seriousness only children could manage, "Then he's silly. My daddy says people who don't show up for kind ladies are silly." Sophie couldn't help it. She laughed softly, a sound she hadn't made all evening. "Your daddy sounds very wise." At that, the girl turned and pointed proudly toward a man standing by the counter. He was tall, dressed in a dark navy suit, his posture confident but relaxed. His hair was neatly combed back, a watch gleaming subtly on his wrist. But what caught Sophie's attention wasn't his appearance, it was his eyes. They weren't sharp like most powerful men she'd met before. They were calm, warm, and a little tired, as if he carried stories behind that smile. He approached with 2 coffees in hand and a gentle nod. "Seems someone forgot what real courage looks like," he said, his voice steady but kind. Sophie blinked, unsure how to respond. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He smiled. "Not yet, but my daughter has excellent instincts about good people." "I'm Ethan," he said, setting the coffees down. "And this troublemaker is Mia. May we join you?" Sophie hesitated. No one had ever asked to sit with her before, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but out of genuine kindness. The chair across from her had felt so painfully empty just moments ago, and now someone wanted to fill it. "Sure," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan and Mia settled in. The air shifted, lighter, warmer, somehow alive again. As they talked, Sophie noticed how easily Ethan smiled, how naturally he treated her, as if the wheelchair wasn't even there. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something spark inside her heart. Something that looked a lot like hope. The cafe felt different now, softer somehow, as if the air itself had decided to be kind. Sophie sat across from Ethan and Mia, her heart still unsure if this moment was real. A few minutes ago, she'd been invisible. Now, two strangers were looking at her as if she truly existed. Mia leaned forward, setting her pink balloon beside her half-eaten muffin. "Do you like drawing?" she asked brightly, rummaging through her little backpack. "I used to," Sophie admitted, smiling shyly. "I stopped after the accident." Mia's small hands pulled out a crumpled piece of paper covered in colors. She proudly smoothed it out and held it up. "It's a princess," she said. "She has a magic chair that flies because she's brave." Sophie looked at the drawing. The princess was smiling, her dress fluttering in the wind as she soared among the clouds in her magic chair. Her throat tightened. "That's beautiful, Mia," she whispered. "She's brave just like you." Mia giggled. "Daddy says brave people don't always walk. Sometimes they just don't stop." Ethan smiled at his daughter's words, his eyes soft when they met Sophie's. "Kids see truth better than we do," he said quietly. Sophie studied him, the way he listened, not out of politeness but genuine interest. She found herself talking, really talking, for the first time in years, about her old job as a dance instructor, about the accident that changed everything, about how people looked at her differently now. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't interrupt. He simply listened, his expression steady and kind. When he spoke, his words were calm and certain. "Maybe life doesn't take things away to punish us," he said. "Maybe it clears the path for what's meant to stay." The conversation drifted from pain to laughter. Sophie told him about the silly things she missed, running for a bus, wearing heels, dancing in the kitchen. Ethan shared stories about being a single dad, about late-night cereal dinners and bedtime negotiations with Mia. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The once cold coffee had gone warm again, thanks to laughter and light. As they finally stood to leave, Ethan handed her a small business card. "Sometimes," he said with a smile, "fate cancels one meeting to send a better one." And as he walked away, Sophie realized she was smiling too. Not because of the man, but because for the first time in years, she felt seen. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of the tall corporate building, painting golden patterns on the marble floor as Sophie wheeled herself toward the reception desk. Her heart raced. This meeting could change everything for her small nonprofit, Hope in Motion, which helped disabled individuals rebuild their confidence through art and skill training. She had come a long way since that day at the cafe. Ethan's words, "Maybe life doesn't take things away to punish us, but to make room for what's meant to stay," had stayed with her. They became her quiet motivation on the hardest days. Sophie adjusted her blazer, trying to calm her nerves. "Charity partnership meeting for Mr. Ethan Cole," she told the receptionist. The name sounded familiar on her tongue, but she didn't dwell on it until the office door opened. And there he was. Ethan stood by the doorway, a soft smile spreading across his face. He looked just as she remembered, confident yet kind, with eyes that carried warmth and reassurance. For a second, Sophie forgot where she was. "Sophie," he said, his voice gentle. "You kept your promise to dream again." Her heart skipped. "You're the CEO?" He chuckled, guilty. "I wanted to tell you that day, but it felt better just being Ethan." Before Sophie could find words, a familiar giggle echoed from behind him. "Sophie!" Mia ran across the room, her pink balloon tied to her wrist as always, and threw her tiny arms around Sophie's armrest. "Daddy says you're our lucky charm," she said proudly, resting her chin on Sophie's knee. Sophie felt tears blur her vision, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were the kind of tears that come when life finally begins to make sense. Ethan stepped closer, kneeling so their eyes met. "We're starting a new foundation," he said, "a partnership between my company and yours, to build opportunities for people who just need someone to believe in them." Sophie's voice trembled. "You mean me?" "I mean us," Ethan said simply. because sometimes the people we meet by accident are exactly who we were meant to find. As the meeting turned into laughter and new beginnings, Sophie looked at the man and the little girl who had walked into her darkest evening and lit a candle there. The woman once left alone in a cafe had found more than hope. She had found home,